we'll introduce our speaker today, Jennifer Buehler with Lincolnharper Music Therapy LLC. And I've been looking forward to this one for a long time because I'm just very intrigued about music therapy. So with that, Jennifer, we'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. I'm going to start out with a song. So this should be one that most of you, if not all of you, know. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought 'twas all in fun. Pop goes the weasel. Now that's just a simple song, but it covers a lot of bases. It can elicit automatic speech. It's great for impulse control because the fun part is getting to jump up when it says pop, right? And children have to wait for that. But they also know that it's there in the song, that the musical cues are there. It's also an opportunity for creativity. Maybe we could substitute another animal. And what does that animal do? You know, that's an opportunity to do a lot of things. Now, I noticed a lot of you didn't sing along, but that's not necessarily because you don't like music. That's a children's song. An important part of music therapy is working with age and developmentally appropriate materials. And so I'm not likely to do Pop Goes the Weasel with my elders that I work with because you know, that's not age appropriate. I'm Jennifer Buehler, and I started my company about a year ago, recertified, but I actually graduated with my degree in music therapy in 1996 from Oxford College in Minneapolis. And I practiced for several years, both in Minnesota and here in Nebraska. And then I had children. I have 3 children, and they're all on the autism spectrum. And they're great, wonderful people growing to be wonderful teens and adults. But things got pretty heavy for a while. And to stay board certified, there's a continuing education requirement. And the certifying agency does random audits, and I got audited 2 years in a row. When the oldest of my children was probably about, you know, this tall, and I had an infant, and it was too much. So I let things go for a while, but my oldest graduated from high school, let's see, almost 2 years ago now. And it was a good time to do some reevaluation of where I was in my life and where I wanted to be. And explored a few different options and kept coming back to music therapy. And while it was a little sad to take that break, there's also been some great things about it. One, even though I don't play clarinet quite as well as when I graduated, on the whole, I'm a better musician because I've had a lot more opportunity to be part of ensembles and explore. And I also feel that that real life experience of being a special needs parent puts me in a great opportunity to help other special needs parents. Because I know firsthand the joys and difficulties of being a parent. So I recertified a year ago. There's an exam that's taken and passed with flying colors, and that's when I started my business. Though part of this presentation is also supposed to be the what's going well and what hasn't. And I don't know if our alternative therapist here, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, if you've come up with your business plan yet and all that, but I did work with SCORE for, I'm gonna say about 9 months before I actually registered my business. And the funny thing is that I'd heard about SCORE clear back when I was a music therapist in Minnesota. At that point in time, I had no interest in being a business owner. And but I had attended a workshop, a continuing ed workshop, and they had talked about SCORE. And so when I looked at the possibility of going back to music therapy, I knew that that was probably my best option, was to be in business for myself. And so found a SCORE mentor and got started. And I'll pitch some of the programs they offer here, because I've been through the Simple Steps class, and that's great because it just really breaks things down. So highly recommend it. And I'm gonna try not to do too much reading off of notes, but I want to give the official definition of music therapy. Music therapy is the clinical and evidence-based use of music interventions to accomplish individualized goals within a therapeutic relationship by a credentialed professional who has completed an approved music therapy program. And that's the definition given by the American Music Therapy Association. And so to break that down a little bit, it's clinical, it's evidence-based. There is a peer-reviewed journal that comes out about 4 times a year to show that evidence-based practice, because that's so important. There's a lot out there, and especially as the diagnosis of autism has increased, there's been a lot of businesses pitching to parents of kids with autism, and some of them are less reputable than others. So it's very important that it's an evidence-based profession. It's individualized. So there's a protocol I go through anytime I work with someone, whether it's a group or an individual. And even with a group, you need to be aware of what each individual's needs are. But that protocol is assessment, planning, and then a constant evaluation. How did my treatment go? Did they benefit? Oops, sorry. And there is a training required to be a music therapist, that I have a 4-year degree, and at present that's still the entry level is a bachelor's, followed by an internship, which I'm not sure what the current hour requirement is, but when I went through, it was a 6-month internship, so similar to student teaching. So went through and did a lot of hands-on experience. And I've found, as I've gotten back into the profession, that a lot of my weaknesses are also my strengths, and it depends on how I look at it. And one of those is that music therapy isn't well known, and it's getting to be better known. The disadvantage of that is sometimes everybody with a guitar thinks they're a music therapist, and music volunteers are great. I love volunteers and performers. They fill a very important role, but it's not music therapy, and it's not goal-oriented. The advantage of music therapy not being well known is that that field is wide open. There are not very many people with music therapists on staff. There's only 25 of us, I believe, last time I looked, on the board certification registry in the state of Nebraska. So lots of opportunities. You know, having kids with special needs, it's very time intensive, a lot of, and sometimes very emotionally intensive. But, you know, it gives me empathy for caregivers, both people who are caregivers of elders and caregivers of children with special needs, because I've been there and understand. And the nice thing is that I've been on both sides of an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, that I actually had written an IEP before my own children were on it. And if any of you have ever been through that process, it's very overwhelming as a parent. And it was nice to go in with a little bit of foreknowledge. The other thing that can be kind of difficult as a new business owner is there gets to be a lot of fees. And a lot of them aren't large, but you know, there's a fee to be certified and to maintain certification and to take continuing education classes, and those are very important because it means that I'm on top of the field. I know what best practices are, but you know, it adds up. But on the other hand, you know, I've got my basket here of equipment, but there's also a lot I can do without any equipment. I did bring my harp with me, but I would say that as a clinician, probably my most used instrument is my voice, and that goes with me everywhere. And I'm also going to do another thing here. I like to use a lot of body percussion. Doesn't require any equipment. And a lot of the people I work with sometimes have fine motor difficulties, or they're really young. So instead of snapping, I think I was in 1st or 2nd grade before I learned to snap, so I do duck hands. So I'd like to see you do duck hands. Excellent, thank you. And clapping. Pat. And then tap. Okay, great. So I'm going to show you a pattern, and then I want you to hear it back. Great. Okay, excellent. So that can address a lot of things as well. Short-term memory. Working with someone, I can gradually increase the lengths of those patterns. Though I found that if I do that, I might need to write it down, because sometimes I forget what the pattern was. But it's great for long-term memory, or short-term memory, sorry. Sequencing, putting things in a pattern. Once again, impulse control. You have to wait and listen. So meets a lot of goals. And the great thing about body percussion, percussion in general, is that it's not culturally specific. It's not age specific, so it works across a really wide variety of populations. That being said, I do have some tools of the trade. This is one of my favorites, and this one, because it's brightly colored, is great with kids. A good chance to talk about colors. And the shape of it's fairly simple. pose.
Perfect, thank you.
So we can also talk about shapes. You know, this is pretty, this part, the neck is fairly straight, so we can talk about triangles. Lowest to highest, which is a pre-math concept. And because this one's fairly lightweight, I can bring it to people and allow them to strum it. So also great in a group because that taking turns, waiting. Movement is really important. That nearly, in fact, you probably know, probably all of the early learning guidelines include movement in some shape or form. And this is for a couple of reasons, partly because, we've got increasing obesity with young children, but also movement and language are integrally connected. So some homemade movement props. Once again, colors. And can talk about concepts, and this is important with language and math concepts, up, down, side to side. This is also another one of my favorites. This is a paddle drum. And because it's got a handle, it can be strapped to the arm of a wheelchair. So someone doesn't need to use two hands. And it doesn't require a lot of touch to create a sound. So even someone who doesn't have use of their hands at all, who maybe uses a mouth stick, can still play this. I'm not a big fan of homemade shakers. The sound isn't great, and you run into some risks of choking hazards. But these are great for sound discrimination, because this sounds a lot different than this. Working in a group is wonderful. It creates a lot of opportunities for interaction. And so playing bells together is a great way to do that. These are color-coded. I don't like these as well for working with elders because they're a child's instrument. But that color coding helps with if someone doesn't read music, sequencing, memory. And I'm also often asked if, I use live music or recorded music. And my answer is, it depends. And it's so nice. I love, when I was doing my internship, I had this huge cart that some of it had our rhythm instruments on it, but most of it was speakers and the sound equipment. This is pretty loud, and I can take it into an early childhood classroom, and this is enough. This on my phone, and it's fabulous. And recorded music is preferable when I need to give someone assistance, do some hand-over-hand work, or do some modeling. I love live music, and I think it's preferable, but it's a little hard to say, put your right hand in when you're strumming a guitar. So recorded music gives an opportunity for modeling and for that assistance. Shakers. This is a fruit shaker, but there's shakers in all shapes and sizes. So appealing to different age groups. So I took this one into the toddler classroom the other day. Maybe shouldn't have taken the fruit-shaped one. I did have to clean this off when I got home. I also use a lot of visuals. If someone is nonverbal or has delayed auditory processing, it's important to use visuals. This one would be wait. Stop. Most of these are obviously, these are more for my kiddos rather than adults. So I could probably go on for a long time about what I do, but I want to make sure that we have opportunities for questions.
So I understand you work with people that have, say, dementia.
Mm-hmm.
What about attention deficit disorders, anxiety, depression?
Well, attention deficit, that would be, those things where we do those taking turns, or they have to wait. Those are good to work with. Generally, if someone has depression, I'm going to say that, in fact, I did have somebody contact me, and I told her that I wouldn't work with her unless she was co-treated.
Gotcha.
Because I'm not a counselor. So, when someone has a serious mental health disorder, and really I see what I do as being a supportive therapy that works in conjunction with other therapies. That there's kind of some new music therapy protocols that I haven't been trained in yet that are more physical therapy based, but generally even those are done in conjunction with a physical therapist. And I think I'll get you next, but him first.
Okay. From the business side of your operation, can you tell us, where most of your revenues are coming from now? I know you work with kids, but do you get paid directly by the parents, or are you going into school settings or programs? And then also I am interested, I know that Alzheimer's patients have shown some benefit from music therapy. I just wonder if you're doing any work in that arena.
That's something that I'm working on marketing too. Right now I've got some private clients, and I work out of my home, so I go to either where they live or their school. And I'm also working with a early childhood school, and I go into the classroom. And what I'm doing in that classroom, I would consider more enrichment rather than therapy, because there's not a formal assessment. I've also got a social skills group that's coming up, and it is private pay. There are some opportunities where music therapists have successfully been reimbursed by insurance. I haven't been trained yet on billing protocols as far as that goes. So at this point in time, I'm telling people that I'm not accepting insurance, but that is a goal to be able to bill in a way that they can submit if they choose.
Have you attempted to reach out to any of the agencies such as Able Link and Lincoln? Because I do see, I've worked with in an autism group home, and I could see that what your services offer is really prospective to working with clients who work with large scale groups of like autistic people. Have you tried to reach out to some of these agencies or?
I've reached out to a few, and the interesting thing about a lot of those service agencies is that when you look at funding for them, funding's a little crazy. It comes from a lot of different sources, and so sometimes funding an extra program can be difficult. And I'm a for-profit company, so some of the agencies, you know, I can't apply for a grant. The agency themselves might be able to. So still trying to figure out some of those ins and outs, but, and I'm a little hesitant. Eventually I would like to offer some services at the young adult level. I'm a little hesitant to reach out there right now because that's the age that my kids are. And so a lot of these providers I'm working with directly because my kids are clients, and that sets up kind of a dual relationship. And it's also, I found that I love working with kids, but a few years ago I couldn't have done it because the emotional resources weren't there. It was just, I was tapped out. And so it's exciting to be able to get back into it and have those, be able to do that, but eventually, not yet.
I may know someone enabled that I could probably refer you to.
Yeah, go ahead and I will get that information from you because I, you know, part of marketing and networking is also building those relationships, and it's nice to have those relationships, even if I'm not ready to directly market to them yet. Yes?
You talked about your educational experience, you know, in your experience as a professional. I'm curious about the transition during the 9 months you said you were kind of building your business plan before you opened. What were the biggest challenges in kind of converting your past education experience into starting your own business?
My biggest concern was whether or not my knowledge was current, which was partly why I dropped my certification in the first place. That certification is actually on a 5-year cycle, and the last time I had recertified, at that time they had an option that they no longer offer, which is to take the exam instead of continuing ed. And I'd taken the exam and passed, but I could feel that I hadn't attended continuing ed and didn't feel like my knowledge was up to date. And so I was concerned about whether or not I had the knowledge to pass the test. And because my funds were limited, I didn't want to go out and buy a bunch of textbooks. And I was trying to study by checking them out from the library. And I'd max out my number of renewals and not be done taking notes. And then I'd have to wait and then check it out again and take as many notes as and I thought, oh, this is going to take me forever to be able to study enough. And a colleague said, just take, there's a practice exam. And I'd heard mixed reviews about the practice exam and whether or not that was equal in questions to the regular exam, but I took it and it was fine, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready. And I found that the exam was as much about mindset and how you think about a problem. And so even some of the exams that were questions that were maybe on some items that were new it was a matter of critical thinking, and I did fine.
In the private sector, you work a lot of your businesses.
I'm still working on reaching out to them. I do have a limited amount of hours that I can take. My kids are still at home. 2 of them don't drive, but I'd like a balance of businesses and private individuals, because I like working with individuals, but I see working with businesses as being more sustainable in the long run. That, generally individuals are going to be shorter term. Any other
questions for Jennifer? Jennifer, I have one last question. I have a niece that's autistic. What kind of benefit do you see music therapy? How would she benefit from music therapy?
It depends on
I knew you were
the
going to use the word
individual.
depends.
Because, and the really interesting thing about autism is the diagnostic criteria has changed drastically. And the diagnostic criteria is actually very broad. And I think there's benefits to all those people who are diagnosed being in the spectrum. But there's a lot of differences between every individual. And one of the things that impacts how somebody's going to respond to music therapy is their sensory responses. And some individuals are very sensory sensitive, and so music might not be the avenue to pursue. Though there is a field of music therapy called improvisational music therapy that has been used fairly successfully, and it's kind of following their cues, the children's cues, and they've been able to work with even people who are very sensory sensitive. The other aspect to consider is what their area of interest is. And I think music therapy tends to be most successful when those individuals are really, at least in autism. Person doesn't necessarily need to be interested in music for it to be effective. But in autism, sometimes that interest in music opens some windows that weren't there before. And you can teach some concepts through music that maybe they wouldn't have listened to in other ways. And music can touch on so many aspects. There's so many different genres of music. There's video game music, which I know a lot of kids on the spectrum are really into gaming. You do something in 8-bit style, and you can get a lot of kids' interest pretty quickly. Music is also really accessible. You don't have to have a lot of fine motor skills to be able to hold a shaker. The motor skills to hold a mallet are a little more specialized, but that's easy enough to adapt. So, see, the advantage of music and music therapy is that it's such a broad field and can be so easily adapted to the needs of the individual.
All right, well, Jennifer, we appreciate you being here today. Thank you. We'd like to give you a Focus Sweet mug
Thank you.
with you. Please hang around as long as you like, there's no need to run off. Today we are not. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine.
Today we are not.